Well, today we're looking at one of the famous stories of a miraculous healing of Jesus as we continue this series. And part of what helps this story be maybe somewhat well known is that it actually shows up in what are referred to as all three of the synoptic gospels, the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that tell the story of the life of Jesus. And we're going to be looking at Luke's version. And this episode takes place in Luke chapter 8, verses 26 to 39, if you have access to a Bible and you are interested in following along. But to give us a little bit of context before we get right to the episode of the story, I just want to back up a few verses and start by reading a verse that comes a little bit earlier in Luke chapter 8, verse 22, where we're diving right in, and it says, one day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side of the lake." So the context for the story, Jesus says to his disciples, let's go over to the other side of the lake. Now, what I want you to know is that this other side that Jesus is referring to is the other or east side of the Sea of Galilee. Because up until that point in the life and ministry of Jesus, Jesus had lived and done his ministry with his disciples on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, which according to their tribe, or as per their tribe, was the Jewish side. But this other side, it represented foreign territory. And for Jesus' disciples, it could kind of only feel like bad news. Yet what I will come to see in this story is that Jesus is willing to go even to the other side for the sake of miraculous healing. Now, our episode then, it picks up here in verse 26, sort of picking up on the other side where it says, they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which, like I mentioned, is across the lake from Galilee. Now, this region of the Gerasenes, or sometimes it's referred to in this story as the Decapolis. It was known as the 10 cities. It's what Jesus' disciples would have referred to as Gentile territory. Gentiles being non-Jewish people who also the Jews kind of saw as pagans, and many of whom of these Gentiles the Jews felt like they were at odds with, or maybe even enemies with, and all of whom, based on their Jewish law, they weren't allowed to associate with. And so heading to this other side of the region of the Gerasenes, it meant entering this territory. And once again, for Jesus' disciples who would have been along with him, this kind of would have felt like bad news, or would have created some angst for them. You know, they would have been wondering to themselves, like, Jesus, what are you thinking? You know, what are we going to get into on the other side? What good could come from the other side? You know, there might even be non-kosher pigs on the other side. Then look at what happened next. It says, when Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. So picture this. Amidst all of the angst and anxiety Jesus' disciples would have been feeling, you know, as they started to approach the shore in their little Jewish fishing boat, you know, they got ready to throw their ropes onto the dock to kind of land the boat. And as soon as Jesus steps onto the shore, this man starts likely running towards him. A man who appears demon-possessed. He's naked. He's not wearing any clothes, and comes rushing toward Jesus. Now, the translation here says Jesus was met by this demon-possessed man. But based on what we come to know in this story, I think this is a somewhat polite interpretation. Because when you consider someone who's described as possessed, and what the writer Mark actually adds is saying that no one was strong enough to subdue him. And Matthew wrote that they were so violent that no one could pass that way. I don't think this was like a polite, cordial handshake introduction for Jesus. When you think of Jesus' experience here, of this man coming at him, you might think, you know, confronted or accosted or even threatened in some way. And I can only imagine the disciples maybe starting to get back in the boat, wanting to row back the other way, saying to Jesus, Jesus, we told you so. We knew this was a bad idea. Here's how else Luke described this man's situation. Moving a little further down into verse 29, it says, though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. This man had become so consumed by what tormented him that others had tried to contain and kind of restrain him, locking him down in chains and trying to put him under the watch of guards. Yet his possession overcame these restraints. And it says the demon drove him to lonely places. Now, I don't know what you think of when you hear demons, or think of demons when you hear a story like this. But I wonder if we can all relate to internal impulses that we all face from time to time, and impulses that can be harmful and destructive to ourselves and others. And that even sometimes when we're aware of these impulses and we're aware of where they may lead, even if they may lead to harm, we somehow still feel driven to follow them. We know the phrase, we all have our demons. And while for many, we can maybe often keep these impulses sufficiently in check, we also know of the experiences where these impulses get the best of us. They overcome us, perhaps even to the point of feeling like they're tormenting us. And then when you consider the theological or spiritual dimension, some scholars would describe these impulses as entities of a spiritual nature in our spirit that are malevolent to human well-being. And sometimes they seem to be most born from or unleashed by or exacerbated by experiences of severe suffering and trauma. We all have our demons. And this man had many. And listen to how Jesus initially responded to this experience of this man coming toward him. In verse 30, it says, Jesus asked him, what is your name? What is your name? Legion, the man replied, because many demons had gone into him. Well, as Jesus often does, he started his interaction with a question. And in typical Jesus style, with a question of identity that even seems to helpfully start to de-escalate the scenario. And it says the man replied by calling himself Legion because many demons had gone into him. Now, the word used for legion here is actually the same word used to describe the largest Roman battalion of soldiers, the largest contingent of 6,000 soldiers, a legion of soldiers. And the story suggests the man used this name because he wasn't just facing one demon, but many, a legion of demons that had overcome him. However, his word choice is also interesting because in this time, the region of the Gerasenes was Roman occupied territory. Part of the many lands in the Middle East there in the first century that had been invaded and conquered under Roman oppression and rule. And many scholars of this story wonder whether this man in his lifetime would have likely witnessed, if not experienced firsthand in up close and personal ways, the oppression and atrocities at the hands of a Roman legion marching into his town. The kind of suffering and trauma that could cause any of us to be tormented by impulses beyond our control and that may come to define our life and our reality. And yet legion was the wrong answer to Jesus' question. You see, while we never learn the man's name in this story, based on what was to come, we can see that Jesus knew who he was. And Jesus knew that this man had been demonized, depersonalized, dehumanized by forces beyond his control. And Jesus knew that those impulses didn't define him, that they weren't who the man was, that there was a person who had been depersonalized, that there was a human being who had been dehumanized, that there was a potential disciple who had been demonized and first needed to be distinguished from his demons and brought back to his true identity if he was also going to be delivered of them. And I wonder how many of us need that today. Need in our own lives and sense of identity to be distinguished from the demons, from the impulses that sometimes seek to overtake us. Or I wonder if we also need to learn to see others in this way, to see people for who they are, not to depersonalize and not to demonize and not to see anyone only for what might be possessing them. I caught a beautiful glimpse of this recently when someone was sharing with me about an experience they had had with their spouse. They were on a long road trip together during a season where their spouse was on a journey of healing and recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And kind of in the tiredness and some of the tensions that long road trips can just kind of induce. And then after being cut off by another driver, which tends to happen if you're on the road long enough, their spouse who was driving suddenly reacted like really intensely, aggressively and sharply, and with road rage response and reaction in a way that was quite uncharacteristic to them, and in a way that was causing some fear and concern in their partner. But then as the moment passed and they took a deep breath, they reflected and they said to their spouse, you know what? That's not you. It's the PTSD. It's not you, it's the PTSD responding and expressing itself. That you are not your condition. That you are not your impulses. That we are not our demons. That's the first thing we see in this story, is that Jesus distinguishes us from our demons in order to bring us back to our true identity. And what we're about to see is that Jesus has the power and capacity to then deliver us from our demons. Picking things up in verse 32, it says, a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, just as the disciples suspected. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. Now, this became the moment of deliverance for the man. Or because of the miraculous healing power of Jesus, the demons came out of the man and he was released of the demons that had overtaken him. And admittedly, it's a bit of an odd story about the demons interacting with Jesus and wanting to go into the pigs and Jesus letting it happen and then the pigs fatally kind of running down this hill and into the lake. And there's much debate about how to best understand this or why Jesus would kind of do things this way. Like, why did the demons have to go somewhere or into something else? And why would Jesus seem to have any amount of compassion on the demons and yet seem to treat the pigs in an inhumane fashion? And while there's different perspectives and no singular easy answers that I've come across, I like what scholar William Barclay suggests in understanding this passage by saying, whatever we think about demons, whatever we may think about demons in kind of our modern mindset, whatever we think about demons, they were intensely real to the people of the Gerasenes. Meaning the man and those watching needed to know the demons were dealt with. I wonder how many of us would need to know that our demons can be dealt with. They needed to know they were plunged into the depths, never to return. And for a kosher Jewish audience, they needed to understand the symbolism that Jesus wanted to bring holistic healing and cleansing even to the Gentiles on the other side, even though the Jews had inherently assumed that they were unclean. But aside from even understanding some of those elements of the story, when it comes to our application, I think what happened next is even kind of more relevant to our lives and our conversation today. It says in verse 34, when those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And then it says, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. First, I think here we got to notice the beautiful picture of the holistic healing and restoration of this man. From demon-possessed to delivered. From naked to clothed. From unsubduable to sitting at the feet of Jesus and getting to know him. Personalized, humanized, delivered and cured. But also then to notice the initial reaction of the townspeople. It says that they were afraid. A strange fear that Jesus' personalization of this man somehow produced in them. And this gets picked up on in the next verse where it says, then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So Jesus got into the boat and left. Wait, what? All the people of the region of the Gerasenes, this region that Jesus intently wanted to come to, asking Jesus to leave? Fear in the face of humanization and restoration? Didn't they get to see and witness and experience, a miraculous healing of Jesus right up close and in real life? It says, so Jesus got into the boat and left. Friends, in the aftermath of the miraculous healing of the man with the demon possession, it seems that there was still another possession at play. The townspeople's possession of or by their desire for the status quo, their preference for comfort more than change, for economic stability and gain through herds of pigs rather than the social restoration of lives in need, for the familiarity and safety of knowing that people like Legion had been pushed to the lonely places. And I think out of their sort of internal fear of personal change and transformation. That if Legion, was and could be not who they thought he was, then maybe experiencing Jesus was going to mean that they'd have to change too, that they weren't yet quite who they thought they were. But what we see in this story is that Jesus wants to deliver us from all that possesses us. That not only does Jesus want to distinguish us from any of our demons, any of those impulses that try to take control in our lives, he wants to deliver us and heal us from those impulses or demons that may overcome us. He also wants to release us from anything else that may possess us and may get in the way of bringing his holistic healing into our lives and the lives of those around us in a fuller and more complete way. I was personally confronted kind of in this way in my own heart recently. It was when our two boys were going through their spring travel hockey tryouts for next season. And now you may feel that travel hockey parents are possessed at the best and most normal of times, and you're probably right about that. But when it comes to travel hockey tryout season, the possession goes to a whole other level. And this year, our older boy Paxton was moving up into the age and level where they were going to be introducing body contact, body checking in his tryouts. And so to prepare for his tryouts, he went to a couple of body checking training clinics where they were learning to properly kind of give and receive a body check on the ice. And while the clinics went reasonably well for him, he did have a bit of a headache after one of them. He seemed mostly fine until 24 hours after the second one, he started to come down with all of the signs and symptoms of a concussion, in which a way that seemed like it could be severe at first. And even worse, that happened on his 13th birthday, where all he could do throughout his entire birthday was just kind of manage his discomfort and disorientation, laying on the couch trying to deal with his headaches and his dizziness and nausea and trouble focusing. He couldn't even read his birthday cards, and it was just devastating for him, and our hearts were breaking for him watching him go through that. And yet, in the midst of the heartbreak for how he was doing, I could feel these lurking impulses trying to work their way into my heart of worry and concern and fear that travel hockey tryouts were now only a week away. And how might this potential concussion, affect Pax's performance or ability to get back on the ice at all? Or what if he has to miss the first couple tryouts and he kind of automatically gets cut to a lower level or a lower team? How's this going to affect our relationship with the other travel hockey parents? Or how is it going to affect our or my vicarious reputation that Pax might not be at his best? And thank God, the next morning, just in some quiet time, I was kind of paying more attention to this. And I kind of sensed that I think I was confronted by, or maybe even met by, the presence or spirit of Jesus, wanting to distinguish those impulses, those possessions that may want to overtake me, and want to deliver them and release me from them to not care about anything other than loving and tending to and praying for my kid for as long as he needed to get better and recover. And I guess my question to us is, in maybe a similar way, even if it seems small, but I think it's not insignificant, what might be possessing you that could be keeping you or others around you from fully experiencing the miraculous wonder of Jesus' healing and deliverance in your lives? Because Jesus wants to release us from all that possesses us. Now, getting to the end of the story, there's actually one more thing that happened before Jesus left. Verse 38, it says, "The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with Jesus. But Jesus sent him away, saying, 'Return home and tell how much God has done for you.' So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him." In the face of whatever may possess us, miraculous healing in Jesus means getting to return home. Getting to return home to our true identity, knowing we can be distinguished from our demons and that they do not define us. Getting to return home by having Jesus play a role in our healing and recovery from those harmful impulses that may try to overtake us, and know that we can return home in being who we are meant to be. And getting to return home by being released from anything else that may subtly try to possess us, may try to get in the way or interfere with the work that Jesus wants to do in our lives, the healing he wants to bring through the power of his love to our lives and the lives of those around us. He wants to bring us to be at home with ourselves and with him and with all those around us. And when we are truly at home in that way, healed and at home, the good news of healing expands. What's kind of cool about the end of this story is it's actually one of the first go and tell invitations that Jesus gives to someone that he miraculously healed. Where in some of the others we've looked at, he told them not to tell anyone, or he kept it discreet or quiet for a time. However, with this man, he made this man who was once possessed by his demons The first person to go and profess to the other side of the Gentile territory of the region of the Gerasenes all that Jesus had done for him and all that Jesus was capable of doing. So where do you need Jesus to distinguish you from any of your demons? And where do you need to bring your demons to Jesus, to invite him to deliver you from them, to make you at home in who you are? And what possessions do you need to release to Jesus? What priorities or ambitions or aspirations or physical possessions, money, wealth, stuff, what relationships, maybe especially if they're unhealthy or dysfunctional, do you need to be willing to let Jesus change or disrupt so you and others can experience more of his healing? That's Jesus' desire for you. So let's bring our demons to Jesus. Let's release our possessions to Jesus. Let's return home with and for Jesus. And let's profess together the miracle of his love that he longs to bring everyone, to everyone on every side of our lives, our community, and our world. Let's pray together. Jesus, we thank you for your will and your power to bring miraculous healing into our lives. And oh, how we need it and still need it and keep needing it. And then when it comes to the things that seem like the demons of our lives, maybe out of experiences or pain or trauma or suffering, these things that seem to be overtaking us, thank you that you see us for who we are. You know that those things do not define us. And that as we keep coming to you, you want to deliver us. You want to bring healing and restoration. You want to participate with us in all we may already be doing to bring full healing and restoration. And we ask for that. We long for that. And we ask also that you would point out to us, confront us with anything else that may possess us, may try to hold on to us or have a grip of us that can get in the way of more of your healing power flowing through us. We open up our lives to you and ask that in all these ways you would bring us home by the miracle of your love. We pray in your name. Amen.